Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this session tonight. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge and also appreciate the nationalities of the people who joined the session. Thank you very much. Before we start, I would like to announce that we will be doing the session in full English. If you guys would like to ask the questions in Indonesia, that's okay. You can type all your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. So thank you very much again for your participation tonight. Um, I would like to announce that you can ask all of your questions, your main questions related to the topic today, the topic tonight in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen so that we can better track and also monitor all of your questions that we need to answer. For the chat, webinar chat, you can use it to interact with the panelists and also attendees. For questions related to other things unrelated to the main questions. So please, if you have any questions, please type it in the Q&A panel, whether in Indonesia or also in English. We will try to answer all of your questions in the session today. However, if we cannot have the time to answer all of your questions, don't worry. We will still answer your questions after the session. We will consolidate all of the questions and we will answer it and send it through your emails. So don't worry. At the end of this session, we will also give you the material and the recording of the session. So don't worry, you will get all of the material and also the recording of the session. So without further ado, I would like to start the session by introducing House of Analytics. So what is House of Analytics? House of Analytics is an innovation lab. Ours is an innovation lab consultancy where we extract unique insights for business using data. So in an essence, we are consolidating business problems and solve it using data-driven decision. And if we see our portfolios, we have a diverse portfolio ranging from financial industries, healthcare, and also retail. And all of the portfolios that we did, it was related to how we solve problems, specifically how can we use data to make better and also faster decisions. Now, I would like to also announce that we are, as a consultancy, we actually, we're not really we don't really have previously classes or sharing sessions. However, due to the demand of mostly our clients, they encourage us to do more sharing sessions. And that's what we are doing every Wednesday. And we also open classes related to decision making in different types of industries. So previously we did a sharing session on people analytics, banking analytics, and our upcoming session is related to finance. So how is the value of business analytics in financial decision making is used? So if you guys are interested in joining this session, please do visit our Instagram for further info. So I would like to also right now introduce the speakers for today. We have Sean, and then me, Tasha, and also we have Sarah. So Sean, would you like to introduce yourself? A quick introduction.
My name is Sean Taher. I'm also a co-founder of House of Analytics together with my business partner, Tasha. And every one of us in House of Analytics are also video gamers, right? We play a lot of games as well in our downtimes. We have experience, right, in today's talk, not just from the player, but as well from the business side. My main skills are in the business side of the analytics as well as the financial. And was it? I also studied in innovation management when I was in London, in University Arts of London, where now I'm back here in Indonesia.
Thank you, Sean. Let me just do a quick introduction of myself. So my name is Anastasia. You can call me Tasha. Actually, my main strength is in human capital analytics. Most of my projects are related to human capital analytics, where we use the data of personalities, of human capital, and we connect it with business performance in order to see the best talent or also to make decisions regarding talent. And different from Sean, my background is in psychology. As we are going to also talk about video games today, we would like to see the insights of the behavioral aspects of gaming, the psychological, the behavior aspects of gaming in this session. So it will be very interesting. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tasha. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. Different from Sean and Tasha, I also have different background. I graduated from one of the university in Indonesia. My previous project, I have handled some of the human capital analytics and financial analytics and business engineering as well. So regarding some of the questions we already received and the materials today about the video game, it's actually like Tasha just mentioned before, when you play games, it's not only about playing games, yeah. So there are lots of analytics in the back end of the video games or in the games itself. So please enjoy yourself and don't hesitate to ask any question during tonight's session.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we jump into the main topic, I would like to also set the expectation of today's topic, what to expect and what not to expect. So what to expect? Number one, we will talk about introduction of data and analytics in the game industry, especially the introduction of how it applies in the video games industry. Number two, it's about the business model of video games, the different types of the games that we see in everyday life. Number three is about the case study. So what are the decision makings that they usually do in the gaming industry? And then number four, the insights that can be applied in other industries. Number five, and then we will also share with you the materials of today's session, whether in recording and also in the presentation of today. What not to expect. Number one, this session we will not talk about the machine learning aspect or artificial intelligence aspect of video games. Number two, we will also not talk about the process of the building and publishing of the video games, the creative side. We will not be covering that. And then number three, we will also not be covering the benchmark of best practices and metrics of success factors in the video games industry. So I hope this clarifies the things that we are going to talk today. Please do ask all of your questions in the Q&A panel, because at the end of the session, we will answer all of your questions. Now, without further ado, let me share with you guys the main material for tonight. Okay, Sean, would you like to share first on the video games business model, and maybe we can do some polling, right?
Yep. So before we dive into the gaming analytics or analytics in video game industry, uh, I want to clarify on what are the business model that we're going to go through, as well as what are the kind of analytics that usually happen in the gaming industry. So, as Tasha has said as well, we're not going to delve too deep into this. We're just going to have a general view because we also want to try and apply this to other industries. And for those of you who are not from the video game industry or from something of the similar, we also want you to have a takeaway or something that you can try and explore from our today's session. So without further ado, let's go deep into the video game business model. So in video games, as some of you who played games know, usually there are two main categories in the video games business model. There's the single player, and then there's the multiplayer. Now I know there are games that are freemium models that, for example, they're free, but they also have a paywall or they also charge you for lives. I think, for example, like Candy Crush or Clash of Clans, mostly in the mobile games industry, those games they're free, but they also have in-game purchases. But then you also have games where you just buy, and then it's basically you can play uh, the whole game without needing to buy anything more, right? Um, so what we're going to go into for the analytics for the video games, it's going to cover both the freemium model as well as the ones that you can buy the game or the premium games. But within that, usually in analytics, for multiplayer games and single player games, the analytics tend to be very different. The decisions are also very different based on data. And that's because if you play multiplayer games, usually the game doesn't end, right? Example of these games are, for example, Dota, right? Defense of the Ancient, or now as Dota 2. Um, and then usually there's Counter-Strike, right? Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Fortnite, very popular with the kids. Um, Minecraft, especially, and a lot of other multiplayer games. Those kind of games, they don't usually end, meaning that um, whenever a developer or a publisher releases those games, they usually keep updating with contents, new feature, new updates, and it usually ends if there's no more players playing the game, and then they make a new game. Usually the data analytics that goes on in the multiplayer business model for video games is all about how to keep engaging with the players. How can we release new updates that players want to play? At the same time, how do we make more people play our games that are new? And so the analytics tend to be more on how do we engage with the players or customers, right? Where we want to make sure that their experience is the same, but also it's continually engaging so that they won't get bored. And as from these multiplayer games as well, like especially Fortnite, they have like a roadmap, right? And they got a massive investment from Tencent to keep releasing new updates, every month or every few months, that keeps the player engaged. And so the analytics around that is mostly for updating those games. Now, for the single player business model, the data analytics are mostly around improving the player's experience for the next game. So single player games like God of War, and for example, I think Cyberpunk 2077, or even The Witcher, or even let's say, what's new, Doom Eternal, right? Or even old games like um, I mean, like, there's a lot. But anyways, those single player games, developers and publishers, they tend to use the data that is gathered from in-game behavior, as well as players' feedback, to improve the player's experience, as well as innovate on the gameplay features and mechanics for the next game. Uh, why is this so? Is because, single player games, they tend to make the game and then it finishes, and they don't really update it because single player games usually have a fixed storyline. If it's not a puzzle game, where you play through a story and it's from beginning to end, and then it usually finishes. um, there are some few exceptions of single player games that that doesn't end. For example, those are independent games, indie games such as Spelunky, and then as well as the Binding of Isaac. Those are those 2D games where they don't usually end, and they keep repeating every time you die, where you can keep playing again and again. um, though those games, they do update and give you a lot of content every few months, but you don't really find that in AAA games or the big budget games, and you only usually see that in the independent games, small games. So in multiplayer, the general rule is the data analytics tend to be for player retention, how to keep your player base playing the game and make sure that they're not playing other game. And that's a very important note. And then for the single player, how do you use the data analytics or the data that you've gathered from players' feedback, but also how they play the game to improve the next uh, game experience in the next game. So those are two different business models that we're going to cover. However, for today's session, we're mostly going to cover the multiplayer because the analytics is more dynamic, because the analytics as well has more examples than for the single player. We're also not going to cover how we're going to use the data analytics for game development, because that's another topic on its own. We're going to cover a lot more on how to improve the experience and how to keep players engaged, where this is going to be useful for other businesses that wants to learn from the video game industry as well. So without further ado, let's move on to the first case study, which is how do video game industry uses data to keep players engaged. So for this particular case study, we're going to take an example from the mobile games industry. So as you know, in the mobile games industry, there are a lot of games that are in the freemium model, as well as very simple games like Candy Crush. Candy Crush is a very, very well-known games where I think it's everywhere in the world people play it. Of course, there are Clash of Clans and all the different games where it's all around the world. Um, but I think Candy Crush is a game where everyone, not just those who are gamers or whatnot, that plays, right? And in mobile games, video game developers and companies are able to track your very movement. They know where you touch in their games. They know all your moves. They collect data on how many hours have you played, when did you play the game, as well as what did you do in those games. So all those data are collected, and this is applicable for all the different games, not just in mobile games, but mobile games in particular are very good in being able to collect all those kind of data. Um, and with those data, there was something that happened in Candy Crush. So in Candy Crush, how the game works basically is that you have levels that you have to finish in the game, right? And you basically start with level one, and then every time you finish the level, you basically progress to the next level. And it's basically a puzzle game where you crush candies by matching the same type of candy into a pattern, right? And then when you match that candy um, into the same pattern, you basically progress. And when they were monitoring the game, they found that they had one particular level in Candy Crush that a lot of players were having difficulties with. And with this level in particular, they found that their advertising and in-game purchases revenue was growing very quickly. And in Candy Crush and a lot of games in mobile games that are free, they get a lot of revenue from advertising, right? And the only way for you for the Candy Crush to get to get revenue is either you buy their lives, right? If you lose, or you basically just watch their advertisement, and they basically get the advertising revenue. And so it's very important for Candy Crush to keep players uh, playing their game, right? The longer they play, the more money that they get, right? As simple as that. um, because one way or another, you have to watch the advertisement so that you can get lives to play, or you basically just buy the lives from the in-game store, and then they get the revenue as well. So this particular level, I forgot what the, the level was. It was a number, level 300 or something like that. And in this particular level, because of the difficulty, a lot of players started to get stuck. And they found a lot of engagement. They found that their social media, everyone was trying to help each other how to pass this level. Um, there were even a lot of was it forum posts in where they're trying to figure out, how do I pass this level, right? And they took this very well. They found that a lot of players are playing the game now because of this level, and they're engaging with each other, how to solve this, right? And because of this sharp rise in players playing the game, they then soon realize that, okay, then why don't we make the game more difficult, right? And what happened was that after that particular level, they made uh, certain levels to be a bit more difficult, so that they'll keep playing and they'll basically spend more time trying to solve that particular level. The harder it is, the more time that you need to solve a particular level, right? Which is kind of mean, quote unquote, right? Where you have to suffer more to actually finish the level. But based on the monitoring data that they found, the more difficult it is, the more engaged that the players are. Usually, you might think that the more difficult it is, the more players are just gonna not play it anymore because it's too hard. But in here, it's actually working for the benefit of the company. However, uh, after the players have finished the level, eventually, most players actually went to the next level, um, because it was very hard and difficult. Players started to leave Candy Crush because it was very frustrating and they burnt out. And soon, the players' churn and revenue started to decrease a lot. And it was, they thought that this was a good idea, but then when they found that the revenue started to drop, and the player base started to drop as well after that level, then they realized, okay, then we made a mistake, right? And they found that increasing the difficulty for short-term revenue wasn't actually worth it, because it was not sustainable at all, where the player base started to drop very sharp. They then started to realize that, okay, we need to change how the levels are being done. And so based on this insight, they then started to do A/B testing. And what they found was that they needed to have that balance between the difficulty and easiness, right? And they did this by monitoring each level in terms of the passing rate, as well as how many moves did you need to do to pass that particular level. So if we go to the right side a bit on that chart, so in here, we what Candy Crush did, or the company King did, was that they analyzed every level on how many moves did the player have to do in order to pass a level. And here, this was for example, this was level 6, um, and they had to monitor um, how many moves that each player had to make whenever if they want to pass it, right? And here they categorized uh, the moves, right, based on the percentage, right? How many people made the moves, and they then classed it, based on the 10 moves and then up to 0. And most players basically find that if you do one move is basically easy. And based on this analysis, they then kept monitoring on every level with this particular analysis in order to make sure that no level is too easy and no level is too hard. And they had to monitor the moves, where making sure that no level had to be more than 5 moves, for example, or 8 moves or 10 moves. And so that they were then able to um, keep track to make sure that the players aren't going to be churning because it was too difficult or it was too easy as well. If it was too easy, then they wouldn't have to watch advertisement as well because of the lives. And as you can see here, for example, the number of moves for 0 or even -1, the effective passing rate was along 50%, between 50% and 75%, and basically it was too easy. And if it was the 5 and to the 2 moves, it was basically much more feasible, as well as that was basically the ones that they wanted to have for every level. Now, of course, you have to take in consider of the player's skill and quote unquote intelligence on how they play the game. Um, and what happened was that, okay, what if you have someone who's not really good at the game for whatever reason it is? Then the game also has to evolve, where they, after this particular analysis, they then created an artificial difficulty where every time you are having difficulty with the game, they would then make it easier every time you don't pass that particular level. And with this particular data analytics, they then uh, make sure that whenever you're struggling or whenever you are um, winning or even passing the level too easy, they will then ramp up difficulty or even make it easier, so that you will then feel satisfied, as well as you will then feel that you are actually able to pass the particular level for this um, for in Candy Crush. So with that in mind, we would like to go to the next case study. So Sarah, which are you ready?
Okay, thank you, Sean, for the very elaborate explanation on the gaming industry as well in terms of player engagement and the introduction of the analytics in video games. After we learn about the player engagement, The next step is that we can also use analytics in video games to create a player segmentation. What is a player segmentation? So basically, player segmentation is trying to figure out what are the characteristics of the people playing the game. For example, if you guys are familiar with the game like Counter-Strike or other strategy that involves shooting and so on and so forth, that might have different characteristic or types of people inside of the game. For example, if the character that we are using is the shooter, the data that can be collected by the company is that we can take a look at the player's behavior, such as what are the characters playing? Is it just the one that use big guns, or maybe people who is not really the shooter type of character, but more like supporting type of character, or what kind of other in-game choices that they would take, what kind of weapons or what kind of ammo and so on and so forth. And by using that, one uh, by using that, we can also branch out the data that we have using profile assessment. So there is one research about the video games that is trying to connect between the player's behavior in game with the profile of the player, which is the player's behavior in real life. And then after that, they're also trying to connect with the demographic. So they take a look at the shooting-based game. In that shooting-based game, there are multiple characters: the shooter, the one who has the bomb, this other supporting player. And then based on the profile assessment, what they found is they see a correlation between the in-game behavior and then the profile assessment. For example, in this research, it was found that people who use character or often use the character of the shooter is actually someone with low empathy. In contrast, people who play as a supporting character, the one who bring the ammo or the one who bring the supplies, the one who helps breaking into the safe house and so on and so forth, are actually people who have higher empathy. And people who often played as a shooter or more like aggressive type of character, the one who push forward, are actually in real life, it was found that based on the profile assessment score that they have higher aggression score. So it means that it is easier for them to be provoked or to be more aggressive towards something. And then after that, the company, after they create the research of the profile assessment of the player in-game player behavior, they can create player segments to categorize the behavior and style of play. For example, if it's the supporting character, what kind of style of play they usually take? Is it that they usually hide until the last minute, or they tail the main character, or they do the overall kind of thing, not only just stay in one role but also do multiple roles? The reason to do that is actually to understand why those players play in the game in such ways and why they keep playing the game. If we understand why they keep playing the game, in the future we can use this data to create what kind of game that these people would like, what kind of game that would better influence the people and, as their friends to play with them. After gaining such insights, the decision that we can make based on those insights is that we can see whether this game is more suitable or more suited to certain personalities of the players. So after we do the research, we can figure out, okay, so in this game, the behavior of the player is ABC. And we can take a look at the demographic of the ABC player is maybe the university boys or people who are still in school, but mostly men, mostly guys within the age range of 25 and 50. And then their behavior is that they like to be aggressive. So maybe we should sell more ammo in terms of, selling more different weapons, different ammo rather than different character armor or different skins and so on and so forth. Then after we figure out the segment of the customer or the player segmentation, we can market the game more. We can better market the game, so we wouldn't waste a lot of money in terms of marketing the game to girls or to little kids or to working moms. We would just market the game to the people who are included in the segmentation, and then we would be able to focus on what are the next contents or updates are that will create better engagement with the player. So I think if we want to see if we want to see more of if we want to learn more about the correlation between the profile assessment and then between the profile assessment and then the in-game behavior, Tasha can explain it later, but I want to recap again on this picture is basically what Sean said in the Candy Crush game that was explained in the previous point. So not only the game that is multiplayer, single player games can also be used using this certain kind of analytics. So for example, after we take a look at the previous case that Sean already explained before, like about the Candy Crush, that people feel, oh, it's too hard, I want to leave. Analytics can also be used to create a player segmentation on Candy Crush. Like for example, okay, the people who connect their progress, who want to save their progress in Candy Crush, they connect their Facebook or their email or their account to the game. And then the analytics team can take a look, okay, so out of 1,000 people who play Candy Crush, most of them are working moms who do commute, who also, have their house to take care of, usually have 9 to 5 jobs and so on and so forth. Therefore, they will put similar game or relevant ads for those people who play the game, increasing the revenue of the game. And they can also create a promotion. What kind of promotion suits working moms? Is it bundling or maybe one-time buying or maybe subscription? Those kind of data, those kind of insights can also be gathered from the games using analytics to create player segmentation, therefore creating a better decision for the game, whether it to get more revenue from the player or what kind of update they should apply, or maybe if the developer want to create a new game, what kind of new game would better suited the same customer characteristic or the same customer segmentation, but still get revenue for the developer or the company.
Thank you, Sarah, for the explanation on the player segmentation. I would like to also bring this forward to what kind of the insights, other insights that we can gain other than business related to another industry. So in here, I would like to bring up a case study. If you guys are familiar with World of Warcraft, so this game, the World of Warcraft, is an online multiplayer game, and it is very popular. They already have a movie out of it, and it's basically an interesting game where you have many characters living in different islands, different countries. They can interact, and they also have friends. They have enemies. What happened back in 2005? This was 15 years ago, right? There was a bug where this virus, they spread every player in the game. So it's very similar to what we actually encounter in the pandemic right now. The difference is that in this game, even if you are near the player who got caught with the virus, you will get that virus immediately. So if, let's say, your lifespan is smaller than other players, you will get killed immediately. And then what happened after that, right? The people who are inside the game, some people behave differently. Some people, they don't care about the virus. They spread, they actually very proud that they spread the virus. Another people, they stay inside their homes in the game. They stay and then they lock themselves out. Other people who they don't really understand what's happening, but they dare to go to other countries inside this game, they got caught. So we can see that there are different behaviors that was happening inside this game when the virus spread. And then this virus case study, it got really popular in America in 2005, so much that the Central for Disease Control, so it's called the CDC, they asked the developer of the game, can we see the data? We want to understand the behavior of the people. Why? Because we want to understand how can this virus spread because of the movement of the players, what are their motivations, how is the interaction. Why? Because in the case of, if let's say we encounter this type of virus, we want to be able to create a prevention method, a socialization method that will be useful for people so they don't get panicked. So it's very interesting that from this case study, we play games not just to play or to get pleasure in playing the game, but we also can understand the journey better. And we can also do simulations of a situation. Of course, in this game, in the world of Warcraft back then in 2005, what they did to kill the virus was they reset, right? They reset all of the games, the bugs, so that the virus didn't spread again. But it's interesting to see how they can already use the data in order to really understand the behavior of the people who are inside this game, and they encounter the situation of the virus. And if we can see, this actually mirrors what we are going through right now. And so that's why when the pandemic was actually very spreading fast, the CDC, along with other international organizations, can help governments to better prepare and better give socializations to the people. And this is a very interesting case. We can give you guys also the link on this one, and also regarding the behaviors of data and analytics in terms of gaming at the end of the session. So right now, what are the key takeaways of gaming analytics? Number one, if we see, gaming analytics is actually about customer centric. How are you going to understand your customers better? How are you going to be creative with your data? And if possible, how can you digitalize your data so that you can better understand your customer journey? Why the emphasis on customer centric and customer journey? Because it's all about trying to track and monitor the behavior of the people. If we don't understand the behavior of our players, if our and our customers, how are we going to set the metrics? How are we going to actually understand what they need better? Maybe Sarah and Sean would like to add a bit more on this one. So this one, the link that I'm telling you about data and analytics in gaming, you guys can see this later. Maybe Sean and Sarah, would you guys like to comment on what are the other key takeaways that we we actually can do in gaming?
Okay, so thank you, Tasha. So this is also to a lot. I check on the question and answer session, and I think this is also important because a lot of people ask about what about the games that we usually play in phone that sometimes we found some ads, 30-second ads, or we need to watch ads in order to go to the next level or join a special event and so on and so forth. This is also related to the customer centric because gaming industry really depends on the customer, here meaning the player. So their revenue will plummet if they lost a lot of player. That's why all of their data or all of their analysis should be around customer centered. In terms of regular business or different business industry, maybe finance or banking or service industry, usually uh, what we see here is that not all service industry is 100% customer centric. So they still want to, please some of the investor and so on and so forth, but they forgot that actually their main customer, their main revenue source is the customer centric. Therefore, that's why learning about the analytics in video gaming industry is actually really important because their business, even though their business model is different, but what we have to copy from them or what we have to learn from them is actually that they are very customer centric in terms of providing service or providing new updates or providing something new for the customer. And apart from that, apart from what Tasha already explained before, the key takeaway from video gaming industry is that we can always find a lot of data on the internet. So one of the game that I really like to play is the simulation game, or you guys know as the Sims. So basically, since Sims 2 until right now is Sims 4, a lot of people, a lot of creator actually create this mods called custom content. So for example, if we want to, the Sims kind of animation, which is slightly cartoony, uh, some people want to make it look more real. Like they want to create a Sims character that looks like Kylie Jenner or that looks like Bill Clinton or Donald Trump. So they create some custom content that could create a mod. So, their character could look like them or maybe have certain kind of clothes or certain kind of stuff that the Sims developer doesn't really explore or they didn't launch it or they didn't even create it. And the creator actually take the data from the internet of the custom content. What kind of mods that is most downloaded by people, that is more preferable by people, that people use a lot in the game, and they created similar creation for their next update or for their next expansion pack. Therefore, people who feel like, oh, I want a custom content, but if I download it, I'm afraid it will crash my game. After they release the same thing or the similar thing, but it's official, people will buy it. So it's also customer centric, but also trying to please the business at the same time. And that is actually achieved by finding their data, not only from the game analytics, but also from the internet or from other source.
Okay, maybe we can go to the Q&A. So, okay, let's see. I'm going to start with Sean first. So, Sean, which one of these questions would you like to answer first?
Okay. So I think there was a good question by Faisal Anwar. So his question is, there are many in-game activities or events that users can do in a video game. How do you determine which events should be tracked for further analysis to improve user experience? And how do you make a measurement plan? Okay, so Faisal, thank you for the question. That's actually a very important question, especially for all businesses. So how would you be able to track whether an in-game event or activity was successful or not, as well as how do you know what kind of measurement metric or even KPI to know a campaign, that particular game in-game activity was successful or not. So similar to in banking or even in in any kind of industry, usually you release a promo, right? You have an event, you release a campaign where there's a massive discount, right? For example, like a lot of e-commerce like Tokopedia, Shopee, Blibli, and all that, those kind of companies, or even eBay, Amazon, they release campaigns for short time events, so that customers are going to buy their stuff, or through their stuff, and then a lot of customers are interested, right? Similar to in-game activities, you tend to release in-game events that are limited time, right? Maybe 1 month or 2 months, so that players are going to play the game, and then they're going to and then it's going to increase the player base again, or existing players are going to keep playing. So what kind of measurement that you would track to know whether this is successful or not, is basically based on um, whether or not the player is actually uh, the duration of the player's you know um, event, right? As well as being able to track whether the player's actually playing that particular in-game activity or not. Where for the user experience itself, it's actually better to understand the player's feedback, especially when trying to understand what were the shortfalls and what were not the shortfall, as well looking into if it's, let's say, you know uh, an adventure game, right? Or like Destiny or MMORPG, especially, they have a lot of in-game events. You can then see what did they do in that particular event and what did they not do in that event, right? um, Especially for World of Warcraft, they can track a lot of things. They can track what were the decisions you made. Did you skip a particular step in that event, for example, right? Um, as well, I mean, the easiest one is, of course, did they go to that particular event, or did they just play the game without having participated there in in-game activity, so that you are able to see the percentage of participation in that particular event. There's a lot of ways to understand whether it was a good event or not, whenever you do this, measure it. Um, but I think the best way is to uh, see how many players you have currently playing and how many players have participated in that particular activity or in-game event, and then you can see the gap, right, or the proportion of the players that actually went into the game or not. Whether they enjoyed it or not is a different question. Whether they enjoyed it or not, you can look into the journey, or even what did they do in that in-game activity or event, um, and did they skip steps or even not even finish it, right? Um, I think you can track the progress even of the in-game activity, how many players finish the whole event, how many players are only halfway, how many players are just 10% of the in-game event as well. Those are the kind of metrics that I would tend to look at um, uh, when I want to see the player engagement as well.
Thank you, Sean. So I have also questions regarding the profile assessment from in here I see uh, from Paul. Can you profile assess the personality people who play the game? Actually, this was already done by the one of the developers of the game. However, they did not do it in a straightforward manner, right? They did not just give it as it is. They package it in a way that they say, can you do this survey for us? This is to increase your customer experience. So that was how they were able to take data on personality, the profile assessment of the people. So what they did was they usually send emails to certain people. They did some samples. They already know the players who are very engaged with them. For example, engaged meaning that in let's say freemium, they are the types of the players who likes to buy the certain different types of the 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 things, right? So for example, in the Sims, you can buy a pool, you can buy a designer clothes, so those types of people. So for these types of people, what they did was they sent an email. They told that, hey, can you help us in increasing your experience in our game by doing this survey. It will take only 5 minutes. So that was how they were able to take the profile assessment and how they were able to correlate the behavior of the people when they play inside the game and with also their personalities. So it was really interesting. So Sarah, would you like to choose some of these questions? Very, very interesting questions.
Actually, I'd like to answer one another question.
Sure, sure.
So by Muhammad Chantia Utama, what is the indicator of burnout that might help to retain user and make them stay and engage to the game, or is there any relate to the kind of gimmick that might be needed? Okay, so thank you for the question, Muhammad. So if we take the example from the Candy Crush one of the retention indicator or analysis that they did was they compared who are the players that stopped playing after a week or even 2 weeks, and who were the players that kept playing within a week, right? Um, and they first separated those two categories into active players and non-active players. I think this is very familiar, especially for banking as well, where there's active customer, those who keep using the card or engaging with the bank, and those who are dormant customer who don't use the credit card for let's say a very long time, a month or 2 months or even 3 months. And so first they segmented the player based on those activities, right? And what they did was they tried to find out, okay, what were different between these two players, those who kept playing and those who left. And they found, they then correlated the in-game behavior as well as other data such as how many hours did they play, how many hours, what did they do, what are the moves, were they a skilled player or not, how fast did they finish, the previous levels as well. And they correlated all of those and made a comparison between the two category of players, the non-active and the active. And one of the differences that they found was that those who stayed, they tend to have uh, stronger persistency, um, as well as uh, longer game time, uh, but as well as higher. Was it they finished it actually quite slow. So it was interesting that those who stayed were actually the ones that aren't really that good in the game, and those who left were actually the ones who were good in the game, and they found that the faster that they finished a level, and then when they got to this particular level, they then found that those who were good at the game left the game. It was interesting because they thought that those who were good at the game would have more persistency, but actually they didn't. And they found out that, okay, then we then can't really, based on that insight, that was why they decided to make that artificial difficulty where, based on the skill level, the game would then um, adjust to adjust the difficulty based on your skill level. So that's why that it's important to segment as well as categorize your customer or even players first, in order to find the differences, those who left and those who has not left.
Thank you very much, Sean. Sarah, would you like to choose one question that you would like to answer?
Okay, so there's one question from Lutfi that is, I think, quite interesting. The question is, the data and decision that we mentioned before seem to mainly revolve around player retention, which are done by analyzing how existing users plays the game. However, I would imagine that they would like to gain new users too. What kind of data research do they do to achieve this goal? So thank you for the question, Lutfi. So basically, in order to find out whether we can get a new user for this new game or maybe new user for the old game, we can also do that by doing the segmentation of the player. This is what we call as the customer journey. So when we first download the game on the internet, we would do certain behavior that is different with people who already play the game for a long time. For example, when you start as a game, you get, let's say when you join, you get reward of 1 million game currency. And then we can track that behavior by, okay, so 1 million game currency, I usually do it to buy more skins and buy more weapon rather than, building shelter and so on and so forth, compared to the old game player. We can actually use it to get new user by creating a promotion. Like, for example, if you join today, if you're a new user, you get this promo code and you get new skins, you get new weapon. And apart from that, we can also, some game, usually after you download the game, some game publisher usually have this kind of question like, where did you find out about the game? Or like, would you recommend this game to your friend? Using that, we can also attract new user. Like, if you ask your friend to join using your referral code, you will also get reward, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple ways to find data or research in order to achieve or in order to get new user. Or if we take a look at the example of Candy Crush. So basically, Candy Crush only started as Candy Crush, but now they have multiple games that are similar like Candy Crush from the same developer, such as Soda Crush or Candy Crush Ultimate or Candy Crush Jelly, and so on and so forth. The game is new, the game is different, the player might be the same, but they keep attracting new players or they keep making new games because they understand that certain people in the original game seek for certain something that is different from original game. Like, for example, some people may comment or write comments on the Google or participate in a survey saying that the original Candy Crush is good but it's boring because the candy only fall from top to bottom. I want something that can go from the bottom to the top. Therefore, they create the Candy Crush Soda. Or someone said, it's good to get rid of the jelly, but maybe we can create something that can, instead of destroying the jelly, we turn everything into jelly. So that is also one of the research or one of the data that we can do or we can gather in order to create, to gather new user or create new game that would also attract new user.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Another question, and there's actually two questions that's referring to the same type of statement from Tree and also from Zul Haidar. So from Tree Pamungkas, interesting idea about player behavior and real life behavior correlation. Reminds me to the Ready Player One movie. Exactly, it's really interesting. As far as your knowledge and experience, is it possible to bring this playing game assessment to the next level? I'm thinking about making a decision about people based on how they play a game. Let's say in company recruitment or student classification, I would say this concept is beyond gamification. And from Zul Haidar, if you don't mind, could you give some experience regarding handling gaming analytics from your client? What client problem or need, and how do you solve those kind of problems? Just general view. Thank you very much, Zul Haidar and also Tree. If I were to share, a couple of years back, we actually did, I won't say it's more gamification. It's actually, I wouldn't say it's game analytics. It's not to, we would say it's not really to advance. However, what we did was this client a couple of years back was an oil-based company, one of the biggest oil and gas company in Indonesia. They were asking us, they were asking our help to guide them on employee branding. So they found out from their survey that actually the engagement of the employee is not that good. It's declining for the past 5 years. They were asking us, can you help us with employee branding? And so we asked them, okay, let us give a diagnostic first. So what we did was we interviewed the people, the head divisions. We also come to come to their office and see some of their employees to do surveys. And then after that, we proposed to them, you know what, we can actually create a game where we can give scores based on how well they can understand the branding, the heart of the company. So what we did was we collected all of their images, all of the brandings, all of the sub company branding. We consolidated into a storyboard, and then we also collaborated with a company who is very good in making gamification in games. And so we tell them, you know what, we can use this to make a game where, let's say, we created a city. In this city, you will have different types of your sub companies and main companies. If we click on the city of one of your sub companies, then inside it, inside the building, inside the classes, we can see that they need to have an understanding of the branding or the images. So if we click, let's say, a building, the building will then go through some of the classes, some of the uh, also rooms, where inside that room you will have to click on a picture or an image, and that image is where the quiz comes in. So these people will have to answer the right question to be able to see that, okay, my answer is the correct one. So from that, we consolidated the scores. And then after that, we give the insights to the branding people and we tell them, you know what, from this, you can already have a brand ambassador. So the decision that was made based on that gamification was that we consolidated the score as an assessment of employee engagement. We already can have the brand ambassador, sort of like the agent of transformation for branding, where these people, can help management to be able to spread, to be able to give the employees understanding about company values, company mission, and also company branding to increase the engagement. And so after we've done that project, we came back 6 months later to review, and we found out actually, yes, it's not that the employee did not have a good engagement to the company. It's just that they don't have they have attachment actually, but it's just that they don't have that awareness. So by having the brand ambassadors, they are very they appreciated how we solved that problem, and they also appreciated how the engagement of the company is actually increasing. Okay, so we have other questions here. Very interesting questions, guys. We really appreciate these questions. However, as we see that we already come to the end of our session, don't worry, we will answer these questions through emails one by one. We will answer these questions one by one, and we will give you through emails, and also we will also give you the material of the recording, material of the mind map tonight. Don't worry. Without further ado, I would like to say thank you very much for your participation tonight. We have very interesting questions. Actually, we have about 20 questions, and very interesting, which we will answer through emails later. Thank you very much, guys, for the session tonight. If you guys would like to see our upcoming sessions, don't forget to go to our Instagram. We also have another session on business analytics for finance, deep dive on the value of business analytics in finance on the 4th of June. So if you guys are interested in that session, we can also give you the info through emails, and also don't forget to check our Instagram. Thank you very much for tonight, guys. On behalf of House of Analytics, I would like to say thank you. If you guys have any questions, other questions, please do contact us in our emails. So here are our emails. Please do contact us for further inquiries, whether it's related to business analytics, or tonight, video games analytics, or other things that you would like us to see or to know. Please do contact us here. You can contact us through Sean, through me, through Sarah, or through our Instagram. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much for your participation tonight.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to question if you guys haven't had the chance to our email.